had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire an energy vampire. But also, they're a literal vampire. And suddenly my team is spending all their time sharpening wooden stakes and buying bulk silver and rehearsing ancient chants, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant takes insights from over 1 billion professionals to create a short list of the best fits for you. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Welcome to Supernatural Circumstances, the podcast where we take you down the rabbit hole into the fantastic world of the strange, the paranormal, and the unknown. I'm Morgan Knudsen. Happy New Year. Come along with me on this week's adventure. Boy, is it ever. Happy New Year, you guys. 2026. I know we've all got a lot going on. We sure do here over at the podcast, and I'm really excited to delve into the new year with all of you. I hope you guys had an amazing, amazing holiday. It was pretty fantastic here as well. I know everybody's kind of struggling out there right now, but we got to appreciate the small things, and maybe it's just curling up to, you know, your favorite show. Just saying. But today we have a recurring guest coming back who I just love talking to, Jason Hewlett, who's been doing a lot of productions with Small Town Monsters and talking about content that a lot of people maybe haven't heard about or haven't really been able to delve into. There's not much about it. And today we're talking about a familiar topic. We're talking about Sasquatch and Sasquatch encounters, but in a little lesser known places in British Columbia. Now, this is really cool for Canadians like myself and probably many of you, but it's also really cool, I think, for international listeners like Americans, everybody that's tuning in from maybe overseas, because we often think of BC, we think of Harrison Hot Springs, we think of like the hot spots for Bigfoot, but what Jason delves into and what we're going to get into here on the show are some remarkable encounters about Bigfoot on people's private property. What do you do? What do you do if you get a house and you move in somewhere like to a beautiful property in British Columbia with lots of trees and you're thinking this is great and there's solitude, but it isn't. You're not alone. What do you do about that? Well, Jason had to answer some of those questions as he went along filming his new documentary, Sasquatch Legacy. So we're going to kick this off here and get into this interview because I got questions. I don't know about you. Something probably a lot of people haven't thought about. Let's get this going. Okay, as a past BC resident, I am really excited about this show. Jason, I'm so excited to talk to you about Sasquatch Legacy because there is so much in BC, first of all, that many people don't realize. I think most people think of sort of the basic hotspots maybe in BC, but all of BC has got so much rich history and encounters with this creature. So glad you're here to talk about it.
Well, thanks so much for having me on to talk about it, Morgan. It feels like we just chatted not that long ago.
I know. Well, because
stuff.
you keep coming out with stuff.
That's what I do, yeah. It's exciting.
Stop coming out with
no,
stuff.
I will and not then stop.
Also, okay, good. Thank God. Because I mean, there's so many great things. I mean, the last time we chatted, we were talking about the Wendigo and Alberta and all the crazy that happened with that. But today we're talking about British Columbia, and we've got a lot of American listeners and whatnot who probably have not been to BC, and maybe have longed to visit or have heard about, you know, this being sort of a Bigfoot hotspot. But let's talk a little bit about that for a minute. Is a bit of the history of British Columbia and its relationship with Bigfoot.
Well, there's been a long relationship in British Columbia with Sasquatch, and up here we call it Sasquatch. I mean, and the only difference is that it's called Bigfoot in the States and it's Sasquatch up here in Canada. But the various indigenous tribes up here, like every one of them has like a wild man story and a diverse relationship with Sasquatch, whatever it is. And it seems to vary from tribe to tribe, but it's all over the province. I mean, where I am here in the interior, if you go out to a place called Talking Rock Golf Course, which is run by Indigenous people, they've got images of like a Sasquatch-like figure, on the flooring and totem poles, etc. And if you go to the coast, there's Sasquatch, and the island, Vancouver Island's often referred to as Ape Island because of the long history of Sasquatch there. Like it's everywhere in this province. And depending on where you are, sometimes it's considered friendly, sometimes it's not considered friendly. But in every case, especially amongst the Indigenous people, there's very much a spiritual being, some sort of forest spirit, guardian of the forest, etc.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that in the documentary that really stood out to me. And guys, I'm going to put the link to the doc in the show notes so you guys can get off of here and go watch it, but listen to the rest of this first. Then
yes,
you
please.
Can go watch it.
Listen now, watch after.
Exactly. It's a lead in. This is a lead in. That was the one thing that really got me about some of the people that you interviewed within the First Nations community that is different from Alberta, where they were very reluctant to talk about it, almost with the same taboo of the Wendigo here in Alberta, which surprised me because normally, at least from my experience in teaching in Alberta and stuff like that and investigating, it doesn't have that same level of reputation here. So what was that all about?
That took me completely by surprise too, especially like one of the very first person I reached out to interview for the documentary was Coralie Miller. And that's because her and I had spoken, and she was a big part of Legend of Ogopogo, the book, and Cursed Waters, the documentary about Ogopogo. And she talked to no end about Nsnaha, the water spirit in Lake Okanagan.
Right.
And she was totally up to being interviewed for Sasquatch Legacy. But her belief, the belief system amongst the West Bank First Nations, is this is something you generally don't speak too much about with outsiders. And her perspective, what she could say basically is that there's sort of almost like a grudging respect between her people and the Sasquatch, which they refer to as strunatum or strunitum. If you carry a rock with you and you encounter it, you share the rock with it in order to guarantee safe passage. But, amongst their belief too is that the Sasquatch used to eat their children. You know what I mean? Like it's
right.
So not necessarily a friendly spirit. And if you're not careful, it can literally spirit you away to the dimension where the Sasquatch live. And if you're lucky, you'll make it back. So that's very different than what my perception about what Sasquatch was. But I found that fascinating.
Really interesting. And that, when you just brought up that notion of them eating children, I wonder if some of those stories have come up from California, because I know in the Sierra Mountains, there was, and this was back, supposed to be in prehistoric times, and I think it was Kathy Strain that ended up repeating this story it was on a documentary somewhere, but she was told, because she deals a lot with the Indigenous people within the Sierra Mountains and further, is that they had what they called the Bigfoot Wars, and that there was an incident where these Sasquatch that were down there were cannibals, and they apparently came into one of the Indigenous encampments, stole a child, took it back, and ate it. And it caused a massive rift, obviously, and there was spears and bows and arrows and fighting, and the Bigfoot, according to the story, didn't fare very well because all they had were stones and sticks and things like that. And eventually, as the legend has it, that territories were established based on this truce, and that now if you go to the Sierra Mountains, there are certain areas they say do not go there because there's still some very aggressive Bigfoot, and we've promised them that we're not going to go there, they're not going to come here. And so I think it's interesting because here we got like BC and the Rockies and the coast and whatnot, it's sort of a direct shot. And I wonder if those stories have maybe it's the sort of the same idea, or whether they're related. I think that's interesting.
It is, and I don't think it's the stories being so much shared as it is they're related circumstances. That's just the impression I got through conversation. But there was so much that she couldn't talk about, so which made it which just for me deepened the mystery, especially when you get to the origins of this. But then also when I spoke with Sheldon Cuisant, who is actually from out east, and he now lives in the Nicola Valley, and he had organized the last couple of interior Bigfoot or Sasquatch conferences. And he had his own encounter, which is also talked about in the film. But he, even as someone who is part of the Indigenous community, but is from outside of it. It doesn't come up so much in the interview with him, but even the local Indigenous won't share too many stories with him because he's not from there.
Wow.
I found that really fascinating too, even though he's a big obviously he held a conference, right? So he's very much a believer in Sasquatch and supporter of the stories, and has had his own encounters, which are discussed in the documentary. But he sort of has his own belief system about it being a harkening back to a former species on the planet before the last kind of great reset, the flood, right? So it's just, it was interesting. It's sort of two diverse takes on the same subject matter, but again, across the board, a reluctance to speak. And because part of the documentary was shot in Harrison Hot Springs, I had reached out to the Chehalis people wanting to get their perspective, but no one ever got back to me from there. So whatever information I could get from around there, I had to get secondhand. So
it's wild. Yeah. Like, I mean, it's interesting the difference between like the West Coast and even just one province over, the difference that, I mean, I've had my own interesting encounters with Bigfoot. I've never seen one, but I've sure as heck heard them. And I mean, it is unnerving. Like, I mean, I do get it. Like it's very unnerving, but I don't know. It was just very interesting. But Sheldon, like you were saying, he had some amazing encounters, including an encounter with his friend, or I guess two of his friends that he had driven down to the water, I think. Do you want to tell that story?
Well, yeah, they'd gone up because they would kind of go just sort of squatching, like, fun squatching. So you kind of just go hang out with your buddies in the woods, and if something happens, it happens. If you find a track. It's more just hanging out. But they'd got Sheldon's brother, who was in law enforcement, had wanted to go out with them. So they kind of went up late-ish one night. And it's sort of this lake that's remote. And he took me up there. And we met his friend Dustin and Dustin's wife Ariel. And it's a trek. And it's not a well-traveled road, etc. So you're up in the mountains in the Nicola Valley. And this is where they'd had an encounter where they went up there and they were in the vehicle, and he'd literally just kind of shone his flashlight out and caught a glimmer of like this hand around this tree, like something sort of standing behind a tree with its hand out. And what struck him even in that really quick moment was just the power in the hand. That he talks very distinctly about that and how big this thing looked. And everyone in the vehicle saw it, and his brother, who's been in law enforcement, started freaking out, wondering what that was. And literally Sheldon turned to his brother and said, like, you got to calm down, relax. And by the time he had turned back, it was gone.
Wow.
But that 5-10 second moment, that's what really changed. He says changed his life exponentially, because it suddenly went from being a story that people would talk about reluctantly to something that to him was very real. And since then, they'd been up and found prints up there. Dustin went up and kind of got a measurement that whatever they saw was probably about 9 feet tall based on where it was standing by the tree. And we actually went to that tree and looked, and they showed it, and it was big. Like, I'm 6'1", and it would have towered well over me. So it's quite an interesting story. And other people in the Nicola Valley, I'd heard secondhand, had also seen encounters with something up there. And again, these people wouldn't talk about it, but there's something in that area. Interesting.
Like the one thing that stood out to me too about Sheldon's story was that when he got back to the truck straps had gotten messed with.
Well, that's a separate story. That's what's so interesting. He had the two.
Oh, okay.
Right? So that one was in the Nicola Valley, that first one where he saw the hand. The second one is in Headley, British Columbia, which is sort of more in the southern part of the province. And he and Dustin had gone up just to, again, go squatching, and they had parked the vehicle it had the side-by-side on it strapped in, and walked up. And that's where they didn't see anything, but they could hear it breathing. And as they
unnerving.
Right? And as they're walking kind of back to the truck, like, okay, we got to go, they could hear something walking beside them. And at one point where they go around a corner, it switched sides somehow. So suddenly it's on the opposite side of them. And it was what I found really interesting about this, and Sheldon says he's not sure if it was him imagining it or something, but he heard a voice in his head at 2 points. One saying, like, don't turn around. You won't like what you see. And then the other thing it said was, you're not supposed to be here.
Right.
And that's as they're walking back to the truck. Dustin's using the clicker to try to unlock it, to get the lights on. And when they got in the vehicle, they realized as they were pulling away that the straps had all been loosened by something. And you have to and I've used straps like that too. They don't just come loose. Like, you have to
No, they sure don't.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, we've used them for load-in stuff and all of that kind of a thing. And I mean, you got to crank on those to get them to budge. Like, you need some power behind you.
Yeah, so something had done that with that power in it. And I've done it too when I used to do construction. Like you just need that. It doesn't just come
Yeah.
apart on you. So one person's experience is two encounters, two very different encounters. One suggesting more of a physical presence, the other suggesting if it was indeed speaking to him in his mind, something more supernatural. But equally are both, leave an impact, especially the one in Headley. Like that's something that spooked him for days.
100%. Well, and it brings to mind actually a friend of mine that had an encounter here that was scared the hell out of her. And there's so many parallels between her story and Sheldon's story, including that gut level, rock gut terror that he described. Like no real way to put your finger on where it's coming from. Like it's not really logical. It's just there. And she had a really interesting encounter. I'm sure she won't mind me repeating this. Sorry, Leslie. But it was so interesting. She was out visiting a friend, and of course, Alberta, there's a lot of people that have sort of cabins in the middle of nowhere here. And the area around this guy's property was Bigfoot territory. There was a lot of stuff going on, and he spent a lot of time researching them. And when she left his house the one night, it was quite late, got in her truck, and Leslie's like, she's a toughie. Like she's a hunter. She's really good in the bush. I mean, most Albertans are, but she extra so. And she's not one to easily spook. And she said that I believe she saw something in the trees. She said the first thing that hit her was that same terror, like gut level fear. And she said the same thing. I can't remember what she said that she heard in her head, but it was that same type of thing where it's like, you need to get out of here. I'm warning you now. You've got one go. And she was petrified. She floored it out of there so damn quick. And it wasn't long before that they had a different encounter. They'd been out setting up trail cams, she and another friend, for hunting season. And she'd been out this was broad daylight. She was out in the brush. And they both saw trees being physically shook really close to the truck. Like just this one patch of trees as if something had the branches and was just slamming these branches. She knew immediately something was up. Her friend came running back, jumped in the truck, and she said what she saw was this tiny little being run from the opposite side of where the bushes were being shaken in front of the vehicle and into the bushes where they were being shaken. And she says what it looked like to her is if you were running on two legs and using your arms like a little monkey, like a chimp. And she said it was reddish brown and it disappeared into the brush. And what was interesting, she said, was that again, that sort of internal voice was saying, I will end you if you don't get out of here. And so same idea. So it was interesting to hear Sheldon's encounter because it was like, man, I've heard this before.
Likewise, I've heard it from various people, right? And that have had these Bigfoot encounters. And I even had something like that happen to myself, like, twice over a span of 20 years, in 96 and like 2017, I think. Same spot at our place out at the Shuswap. And it's just, again, it's a feeling that comes over you out of nowhere that you're not supposed to be, no voice, but you got to go right now. It's like pure fear. And you leave. And I remember both cases I listened and left, and it took like almost an hour for that feeling to subside. And I've been out there most of my life, frequently on a weekly basis, and only twice that's happened. But it leaves a mark. You never forget that feeling of terror. So I find that really interesting.
Yeah, it's wild, and it's pervasive through all the stories, just like the smell.
Yes, the smell.
Pervasive
right?
through all the stories. I remember I was out. I was doing a workshop out in Coal Lake here in Alberta, and I'm positive this was a Bigfoot. We had been out in the bush with a group of people and was teaching cryptozoology stuff, and that afternoon we'd come across these giant tracks near a swamp. And I mean, there's no mistaking the size of these tracks. They were so big. and it looked like whatever it was either following a deer or something like that. And the tracks were huge, so I ended up getting some photos of them. But later that night, we were doing a workshop in the same area, and that smell came out. And I think one of the people in the documentary described it as wet dog and poo. Mm-hmm. That is exactly what it is. That was Corley, but yeah, she's spot on. She's spot on. Have you run into that too?
I haven't, but I know, and it's in the documentary that Kenton Moore, who had his experience, he would smell something awful like that around his
so
farm
bad
a few times. But I haven't smelled anything like that. I've just had more of the fear response, right? When we were also filming it, we smelled like something urinated right near where we were that we couldn't see, and you could smell that. It was super strong. But not the wet dog and poo. So I'm still waiting for that one to happen.
Believe me, you're not missing much. Kenton, though, and I found his story, things that in a lot of people that get cabins or have homes or whatever in the woods have to deal with a lot of the things that Kenton talked about. So do you want to talk a little bit about what he was experiencing and what was going on?
Yeah, the first thing was an encounter he and a friend and his friend's two daughters, if memory serves, had. And it was like they were up in the woods on a Forest Service road. And for whatever reason, it stopped. And the friend had gone up, he had seen something and had gone up this like hill basically and disappeared into the trees. And Kenton had been out kind of just hanging out waiting, a rifle at the ready, and then his friend came ripping back down the hill, running unsafely. And we went to that hill, and you wouldn't want to just you got to be careful going down this hill, but he was not.
It was
concerned. rough terrain, and is just yelling like, go, get in the truck, we gotta go, and Ken's like, what is it? And it's like, it's a Sasquatch. And they got in and just drove at breakneck dangerous speed, coming out on a part of the road that we also stopped at where he had lost control. This is a guy's $60,000 truck that he babies, and he was just terrified. And when they'd kind of finally stopped at a safe distance away, and the guy was visibly shaken and trying to light a cigarette to calm down, he said he had been up there looking around and paused and seen like a footprint in the ground, and then something threw this large chunk of tree at him, basically, and that's what prompted him to run. And seeing the foot and then something being able to throw this ridiculously large chunk of wood, which not everyone can do, made him think that it was a Sasquatch. So, and Ken had told me that story like a couple of years ago, like not long after it had happened. And so when I got the go-ahead to make Sasquatch Legacy, that was a story I wanted to tell. But what was interesting is we had arranged to go out to Kenton's to interview him and then go tell the story, go to the location where this had happened, when he started having a couple things happen on his property. And one of them is something went into his chicken pen and tore up a bunch of the chickens, like inside the pen. And it's a fully caged. You see it in the film. It's fully caged. Like there's no, you've got to unlock and get in through a gate to get in and do it. So something had done that in the days leading up. And not just like tearing apart, but like obliterating. Like there's just nothing left of these chickens except for little bits of meat, and something had hauled even some of it outside of the pen. And then his dogs had gone, like you'd said, you live in the woods, you have animals, they can sense when something's there. And one night around that same time, the dogs had gone ballistic and demanded to go out and chase something up an embankment behind Kenton's house. And it's a really steep embankment, as you see in the film. And the dogs were gone a good 20 minutes. When they came back, like they were like, the big one was, I think, visibly terrified of whatever it had encountered out there. And these are dogs that have chased bear and other animals around. And also sort of within that same time period, Kenton, who always sleeps with his window open, no matter the season, it smelled like something terrible around the property. Not on the day that the chickens were harassed or when the dogs had encountered something, but all of this is within a span of a little while, around the time that we went back there to do our investigation. And we even show it in the film on Google Maps. His home and this encounter site is almost a direct line. Like it's a 20-minute drive, but they're within a direct line of each other, across like just nothing but forest terrain.
My God. Yeah, I think people don't realize, when they have this sort of picturesque idea of, living out in the BC mountains and it's so pretty and whatnot, but there's guests that, have had the land first before before anyone else. I remember this story and I can't remember. I want to say it might have actually, I think it must have been on the island. Must have been on the island. And it was a fellow who owned a cabin out there, and the cabin was only accessible. Like, you couldn't drive to it. You had to either like fly a plane in or have a boat come in or something like that. But I remember it was in BC, and it was his summer cabin, so it would get locked up at winter because it had no insulation or anything like that. And it was out in the woods, surrounded by woods. Nearest neighbor was quite a distance away, but had a blueberry patch. And I remember his story so clearly because the Sasquatch in the area during the wintertime had essentially claimed this cabin. So every time he came for the summer and to sit and to, enjoy his cabin, they were like, "Who the hell are you?" And they would be coming up to him, I guess like the family or whatever would want to go sit around the fire or something like that. And they were getting rocks chucked at them. They would get to the cabin and they would find that the cabin had been like basically looted. And it wasn't looted like a bear would loot it. Because oftentimes bears, if they loot a cabin, they'll go for the freeze on or whatever in the freezers. Because it's really attractive to them. That would be left. But stuff would be moved around or whatever. So the guy apparently started putting out spike strips at the door because they would be coming right up to the door going like, "Who the hell are you? Get out of our house." And so there was this whole issue going on. So when the people were there filming this cabin, there was nothing. No Bigfoot seemed to come around that night. And they got a call from this neighbor who said, no, they're in the blueberries. At my place in the blueberry patch. But it was this whole thing where he basically he lost his summer cabin to them.
And you hear stories about, there's something in Ontario, I think it was on Monster Quest, they detailed that. Something very similar to that cabin you got to fly into.
Yeah.
Same thing, something around there wrecking the place when you're not around, etc. And even, Alex Petikoff has his Alaskan Bigfoot series out at the Area A site, and the person with his remote cabin, same thing. I think you're right, Morgan. Like, we move into these areas looking for peace and solitude, not taking into consideration what else is there. I mean, there's bears, there's deer, there's cougar, there's bobcat, there's all sorts of things. But, if you believe it, there's also Sasquatch. And so you're going to cross paths with these things. And more of these stories are coming out to support the existence of just such a being.
100%. I remember reading one of the Bigfoot groups that I'm on Facebook. And I remember this poor lady had messaged the group. And she had told her story. She had gotten a cabin, and I think this was in the U.S., but they just purchased this cabin. And when they got there to move in, I guess the previous owners had boarded up all the windows. And they were like, "We were just moving in. Like, why would you be boarding up the house?" So anyway, they move in, and she had said within 24 hours, she realized why. There was this family of Sasquatch, I guess, on the property. And she said they weren't bad, but she said the younger ones were like rowdy kids. And she said they were coming onto the property, like chucking garbage cans, like yelling, screaming, whooping. And so anyway, she had written to the group to ask, what the hell do we do? We just bought this place. And now we realize we're surrounded by these things that are just like, it's like moving in with bad neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you do?
what do you like? Right. Well, everybody sort of had a different thing. They're just like, well, you could try sharing with them, or, people would be like, well, I'll move out. I'd just get out of there. But they just bought the place. You can't just pick up and go. I don't think there was a decision that was made like at that point in time. But I remember that story and just thinking like, man, if you move into a place like this, you really better have either done the homework with the neighbors, or, be prepared to share if they're going to let you share.
Yeah. That's the other side of it, right? I think, and with Ken, which was interesting, is that his family's been there forever. And this is kind of only a recent thing, which to me suggests that there's either not that many in that area, or they maybe they travel and move about. You know what I mean? And just had happened to come through, and because there's chickens and they've got beehives, it's something just attracted the attention of one that came down to check things out for a few days, and maybe the dogs did finally spook it off. But his is a fascinating story, and I mean it's a good part of it's like the wraparound story of the documentary that really grounds it in a very recent, Sasquatch encounter story.
Yeah. It's interesting because it brings up so many questions, I think, of like what do you do when you see something like this? Not just if it's on your property, but what the hell do you do? I had a friend of mine, Greg Backen, on recently, who, I mean, we go back and forth about Bigfoot and Dogman and stuff all the time, and he's had some really fascinating encounters. And for those listening, you can go catch Greg on Ghostbox Radio. He's got a really cool show. But he and I kind of connected over my experiences with Dogman and building a connection or a relationship, and his experiences with Bigfoot with that sort of same vein. And I noticed it came up once in the doc as well, is that the connection with them isn't so much about going and researching them as it is allowing them to come to you. That the idea of these guys, if we go out and are hunting for them or looking for them, the odds are you're not going to find one. But if you kind of allow that connection, allow them to come to you, that's going to be the person that discovers the proof. Like, what was your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with it 100%. That's something Jerry Matthews said. Like the person who's going to discover Sasquatch is someone who's not even looking for it. Like they're just going to be out in the woods doing whatever, and they're going to come across this. And and I've done some filming since then on a project, and that was also the general consensus that came up. And most old school researchers like Jerry Matthews and Thomas Steenberg, that's their approach to it, and I think that's kind of the right way. Like the stuff like the whoops and the call blasting and the tree knocks is more of a recent thing. And I think popularized because of TV shows and the internet, and I get it. I mean, it's something we even did in Sasquatch Legacy, because you got to do something. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to investigate, you got to do something, and this is a visual medium. But I think you got to be really careful, and you shouldn't expect that that's what's going to draw it out. Although we had stuff happen that I can't quite explain.
Why don't you talk about that a little bit? Because you did have some interesting things going on.
Yeah, well, we went up and we interviewed Kenton at the site where the experience had happened, and then Ollie kind of went off hiking on his own, which was because he likes to do that. So he went off and did his thing, and we went back to the truck, and we're talking and just doing some additional filming, and a lot of time passed, and Ollie just hadn't come back yet. And so I got a little bit concerned and was sort of calling for him. But what had happened is he'd kind of gone out through the field where this thing allegedly threw the tree from, found another road and was coming down, and he found what looked like something had crawled up that embankment or went up this embankment, like dug its feet in and went up. But also what looked like something had jumped down, and there were these big imprints that looked like feet, and even like, when something lands and you put a hand out to steady yourself, it looked like that, and then something gone across the road and then broken down trees and stuff and on a little path that went into the brush. So we finally connected with Ollie, and we went up there and he showed us all of that. And then it's like Ollie heard like a growl or something in the tree line. And that kind of prompted us to try some knocks, which not much really happened. But once sun had set, we'd gone back to the top of the encounter site and we're doing, the knocks and some whoops, and something kind of whooped back at us. Ollie and I both heard it. That became like the little stinger at the end of the documentary. But we also heard movement in the trees around us. And then we smelled like something urinated there.
Yeah.
And it was like the worst smelling pee ever kind of thing. We didn't see it. Who knows what it was, but I mean, I've spent a good chunk of my life in the woods, and I've never had an animal do that right where I was, where you could smell it. You know what I mean? Like, so it was that I found quite fascinating that happened. And that was like a bit anomalous for all of us. And we're all outdoorsy people and spend copious amounts of time in the woods.
Well, and I mean, it would have to be a lot of it too, in order to create that amount of smell where you're going, oh my God, I can't handle it. Like, that's not really a squirrel.
No, or even a deer, I don't think, right? Or
no.
A bear, you would have heard huffing and noise. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's some really interesting places. And I mean, and you got to of course, visit Harrison Hot Springs, which a lot of, I think, Bigfoot fanatics will recognize that name. And then, of course, its history with John Green, which is so amazing. And I think that's the other thing about BC that I love, is that so many significant names that have contributed so much to this field have come from BC. John Green, even people like Thomas Steenberg, who you got to interview, which was so cool, by the way. I think it was really neat to hear him talk about Big Blondie in 41. I thought that was really neat.
At Ruby Creek, and Big Blondie.
Yeah, so cool. When you were at Harrison Hot Springs, John Green's legacy must have really played a role in impacting how you guys went about this. I mean, how can it not? Because it's John. I mean, he founded this. What were your thoughts about that? I mean, you guys were really standing on the shoulders of giants doing this.
Well, that's what really hit. I'd gone to Harrison Hot Springs several times to vacation, and when Small Town Monsters was up making On the Trail of Bigfoot: The Origin, they kind of focused a lot on John Green in that area. And so I thought to kind of do a documentary that to me was going to be about the legacy of Sasquatch. You couldn't not go to Harrison Hot Springs.
Totally.
Talk about John Green. You have to. And I went to the Kilby Historic Site where there is the John Green Museum. There's shots of that in there. Well, Mark Matsky kind of really brings people up to speed on who John Green is. For those who aren't initiated, haven't been initiated to who he was. And he was what I really respect about John Green, and having read some of his books growing up and even owning one of them, was that, he was a journalist first. Yeah. And that's how he approached it. And that's kind of my background as well. So he's someone that really started kind of taking it seriously in terms of investigating and approaching it like a journalist, collecting all the facts and all the pertinent information and creating a file card system to document these experiences properly. And just approach with a journalist sort of skepticism, but open-mindedness, and treating the interviewees and the experiences with respect. Because he was the person who documented Ruby Creek.
Yes.
Right? He did that. Him and Renee DeHinden did that. And so that was really neat. And actually to be able to go to the actual site where the Chapman property was, for Thomas to take us there and sort of film there and just be in that spot while he told the story, really brought that story, I think, alive.
Oh, that Chapman incident is so unnerving. It
is. But it's also you're right. It's unnerving, but it's interesting. It's very, looking back, it's not dissimilar to Kenton's in a way.
100%.
People living in the woods, something coming up and checking the place out and sniffing around and rummaging through things and scaring the people and that kind of thing, right? It's very much in line with a lot of those experiences. Yeah,
reminder that we're sharing this land. We really are sharing it. We don't own nothing.
We don't. We're just visitors here. And I think that's kind of, in a way, talking about it now, that's almost, I think, kind of a theme in the documentary. Whatever this has been here way longer than us, and it's wary of us, and we're kind of moving into its territory, and I don't think we're good for it or the land.
Yeah, well, and that's something that comes up, in the doc. I think it was Brad Trent that talked about how Bigfoot on the whole is very wary of us. As much as they, they're curious and that they seem to come up to homes and whatnot. For the listeners, to check out Jenny Chapman's encounter, because it's so interesting. And there was a Bigfoot in the 1940s that was seen in that area that they nicknamed Big Blondie, because she had a dark sort of black skinned face, but this sort of tea-colored fur. And she was nicknamed Big Blondie, and she was kind of seen in and about, sort of interested in these properties and whatnot. But that seems to just be a theme. I remember even here in Alberta, during the lockdowns, people were seeing far more Bigfoot out on the trails and things like that, because people just weren't coming out. And so you kind of see this theme where, I don't know, I've always gotten the impression where I've had a lot of encounters with dogmen over the years who are very nervous, but wanting the connection. When they're approached properly, they want that connection. Where with Bigfoot, I don't know. I'm not sure they do. They seem to be happy in their reclusiveness. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree as well. I mean, you do hear cases where people can share a property with them, right? And
Yeah.
you can seem to get this coexistence, but it's not like they're doing it in some suburban neighborhood, right? Like you'd have your own property out in the woods, probably big enough to support there'd be room for both of you. You know what I mean? Like yourselves and the Sasquatch. And I think you can kind of coexist that way. And I mean, you do hear tons of stories around Harrison Hot Springs. The Sasquatch haven't moved out of there despite all the people, but I think they do want to keep to themselves, and they're just not that interested in encountering with us. And even there, we didn't get into it in Sasquatch Legacy, but it's something that I'm going to touch on one of my next projects. That there are places where the people and the Sasquatch made an agreement, and then they don't cross over. Much like what Sheldon was saying in his story, like that mountain in Headley is theirs at night. They weren't supposed to be there. So I think you can make. I think there's places where the indigenous people and the Sasquatch have kind of made this bargain.
Yeah, that's kind of the impression that I've always gotten as well, and sort of brings me back to the things that Greg and I have talked about, and that you and I talked about when you were here, as to how do we create that relationship and approach them, or if you find out that one's on your property, what can you do? And I think back to when you were here, when we were talking Wendigo and things like that, and we were talking Dogman and all of those things, and how Alicia, had us go through the smudging ceremony and all of those things. Do you think those types of things with a situation like this would help? Or I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm not so sure. Right? Because like you got to look at it in almost two ways. If it is spiritual, like it might help, but this is also something that's also very physical,
100%,
and behaves like an animal. And I mean, I don't think animals care if you're smudged. You know what I mean? Like
no.
that's where I kind of really have a problem. Like not a problem, but that's where a lot of it with Sasquatch. I think there's a spiritual component, but I think it's very much a flesh and blood thing.
Yeah,
and so it's going to behave that way. And you could probably have like a copacetic relationship with one out at your property until you did something to piss it off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Like, and then it doesn't matter. Like it does as much like if you have a bear on your property and everything's fine till it gets really hungry or you hit it with a stick or, you know what I mean? Like you got to be careful. And that's where I don't think there's anything you can really do. I think like when the indigenous people talk about the rocks, I mean, that might have worked then. Would it work now?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. I think it's interesting. Like when I look back at the history with Dogman, and especially within the First Nations and the stories and whatnot, and how initially they had a trade relationship, and they would speak about when the Europeans came in, like they would speak about don't bother. They talked about them like a tribe, like don't bother this tribe. Like we have a good relationship with them, and whatnot. And you don't hear about that with Sasquatch. Here you've got the same thing that you ran into, where it's just like, no, we don't talk about them. They stay over there, we stay over here. Like it's very different. And I don't know. I remember this was about a year ago. I had on Ron Moorhead on the show, and we were talking about this idea of like quantum Bigfoot, basically based off of his book. And whatnot. And he's very much of this idea that they're spiritual, they're interdimensional, but at the same time, he is under zero illusion that these can be aggressive as hell. Like when he talked about his encounters in the Sierra Mountains, and for listeners, if you guys haven't heard this episode, it's really interesting. He spoke at length of because he's responsible for the famous Sierra recordings. The Sierra Sounds back in the 1970s. And every time he would go up to this remote location, the big male was ready to kill him. And they had sort of this campsite that was very well sheltered, with a door and whatnot. But he said these things he was afraid. Like he was afraid, and he said they didn't want to be friends. Like he wasn't interested. He wanted them out. And so I don't know. Like you, I don't know. If I had one mad at me, I think I'd be terrified.
Yeah, I just wouldn't. And I had something happen, and I'll talk about it not on this show, but down the road, that happened while we were sort of beginning to film the next project, which was actually like that Ollie and I experienced. It was quite frightening.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things. And, like, again, we're avid outdoors people, and Ollie's been doing this for a long time, isn't scared of much. And we had guns, and even he's like, yeah, no, let's get out of here. It's a 2-click hike back to the truck, and it's snowing. We got to go. Like, just, we're not playing around. And that would be my approach too, if something's there that you felt was behaving in any way remotely aggressive.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people need to listen to. Like, I remember Ron was out on one expedition with a group of people that I know up in Alaska. And what was interesting was that was one of his number one do not do's, was things like he advised against it. They ended up doing some call blasting with the Sierra Sounds in Alaska, in Portlock, Alaska. But he had said he absolutely does not recommend it. And he said, because number one, you don't know what message you're sending.
Right.
You don't know what they're saying.
That's my theory with that kind of, you don't know what this is. Like, why would you do
don't
that?
know. Yeah, you have no idea what it is. And then on top of it, he said the instances that people have done it, he said these things will come busting out of those woods faster than you can blink. Because they're pissed. And I think so. What would your recommendation for people that are really interested in this? Because I mean, I'm one of them, but I don't think I'll be doing that any too soon. But what would your recommendation be if people want to go out and experience something like this? Like, where can they start, and what shouldn't they be doing based off of what they're seeing on television?
Basically, don't do a lot of what you're seeing on television.
If it's on TV, just nix it. Just nix it.
Right? Go out like you're going to go out with your buddies in the woods. Camp, have a fire, hang out, and just don't be flashing lights around and being too goofy or aggressive or anything like that. Like, just be out having a good time, sitting around the fire, talking, cooking some stuff, and just take some time to be quiet and listen. And I think that's the biggest takeaway we got from doing this doc, and even like some of the work that's coming is like, just go out there, and if again, like we've already said, if Sasquatch wants to come across you, it's going to do it on its terms, not the other way around.
Yeah.
It's kind of like and this too, Morgan, when you're doing a paranormal investigation or a ghost hunt, if you try to provoke something, you don't know what you're going to encounter or what you're going to get back. So you go there, you be respectful. You kind of do your thing, like you're hanging out there. And then if something's going to happen, it's going to happen. And I think that's the best way to approach this. And the difference between a ghost and a Sasquatch is, we haven't heard cases of ghosts tearing you apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But there are missing people in regards to this. Yeah. There are missing people in regards to this subject that I don't think people, maybe, I don't know, don't take seriously or whichever, but the reality is there's been injury. There has been, people disappear. And it's, I think going out, anytime we all go out in the woods, we're never in control. I think that's one misconception with a lot of this, is it's like, I'm going to go out there with my gun, and I'm going to go out there with all my camping stuff, and I've been in the woods a million times. And it's, as soon as you're the one that says, I've been in the woods a million times, it's fine, you're the one that's going to go missing. Like,
or something else is going to happen. Like
100%. Like, I remember a good friend of mine, he's a very, very good swimmer. Like, he's into all the like hardcore sports, like rapids, like going down the rapids in canoes, and like, crazy like whitewater rafting stuff. Like, he's a hardcore swimmer. And I remember we were having this conversation with another friend on the docks here in Alberta in Wabamun. And she was going on and on and on about, I'm such a great swimmer and this, that, and the other thing. And she was, nowhere near to the capacity that he was. And he said, as soon as you say that, you're the one that's going to drown. Because he said, you are never, ever, ever in control out there in the water. He said, even at my skill level, he's like, I've had close encounters. I thought I was going to die. And it's like, nature has this way of flipping the tables so quickly. And like, I can't even imagine being in a situation where, you're out there with something like that. And once that's barreling down on you, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah. Run. But even that might be dumb. If it's as big as these are supposed to be, they could outrun you in 2 steps. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like
Yeah.
you could have a rifle and I guess you shoot and hope that works. But even then, like, this is something huge. Like, it takes several shots to take down a bear, right? Like, and this is bigger and stronger than a bear. Like, I think people don't think about that component. And never mind Sasquatch. There's lots of other things in the woods to worry about, right?
Yeah.
Like,
This is Canada.
this is Canada. Like, there's cougar, bobcat, wolves, coyote, bears,
Moose.
grizzly bears.
Yeah, moose for that instance.
Moose, snakes, like there's all manner of things out there you got to be cautious of. So you should, one thing, I mean, my father always taught me was like humility. And that'll save you 9 times out of 10. Like, again, yeah, don't be cocky and think you know what you're doing. No matter how much you know what you're doing.
Yeah, they know more than you. That's it. I mean, it's their territory. Like even the encounters, a couple of the close encounters that I've had with Dogman, even though they've been very peaceful, there's every single time you are humbled quickly, and there's never a point where I think I'm the one that's in control of what's going on. Ever. It doesn't happen. It's you're on edge no matter what. Even when everything's going really well, you're on edge because it's like they've got the upper hand 100% of the time, and there's no question, and it's fun to hear about, and it's fun but it's another thing when it's you and them, and you're not entirely familiar with things like their body language, stuff like that you're not thinking, well, okay, if I make this move or that move, or, with a gorilla, for example, you smile at a gorilla, they're going to lop your head off because you've shown your teeth.
Right.
So you're just going, what, like, what do I do? And I mean, I remember the one Bigfoot encounter that, a group of us and I had, this was interesting. And it was actually very close to, we were actually listening to a group of dogmen at the time that were hunting a group of coyotes, and it just sort of the same thing as in Land Between the Lakes. Oftentimes you'll hear one and hear the other, and here in Alberta that's kind of the same thing. Like many times where there's dogmen, sometimes you'll actually hear whooping and stuff like that from Sasquatch. And I remember the one encounter we had. We were on one side of the road. The dogmen were on the other side of the road. We could hear them. And from our side of the road, we started hearing whistles. And they were really loud, like whistling. We'd hear these kind of like grunting noises, almost like gorilla noises, like ape. And so we were hearing these sort of like noises, and the whistling clear as a bell. And I mean, at that point, it was like, no, it's time to get back in the truck. It's time to get back in the truck. That's enough. Because I mean, I don't want one of these things barreling down on me, and I don't think they're going to listen. So, no, yeah, I think respect is everything. Respect is everything in this.
I agree, and I think at any of the work done in the paranormal, there needs to be that respect. No matter what you're looking for, be it Sasquatch or a ghost or UFOs or what have you. You got to have that healthy respect for it. Have
you heard of? Before we wrap this up, because I'm curious just to know what your take is on this. I've heard a number of times from BC, people seeing or having a Sasquatch encounter, or there have been a Sasquatch encounter within a day or so of seeing lights and things like that in the woods. And I find it's very interesting, and I don't know whether I don't necessarily believe that it's the Bigfoot. I know people have sort of roped those two into being the same thing. But I find it interesting that where these things are seen, there's other phenomenon going on. And I'd love to know your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think no one has reported that specifically to me, anything like that. But I mean, you are hearing that more and more with just stories, like Sasquatch encounter stories. And I think we've had stuff happen around some of the filming we've done that could be called paranormal, but not directly related to Sasquatch. Mm-hmm. I just think the phenomenon is always there. Do you know what I mean? I think there's all this stuff, we've talked about this before, Morgan, like there's this stuff is all kind of happening all over the place, and
100%.
in some way this is all interlinked somehow. So I'm not surprised. I know that there's been cases in the past where people would leave the wild aspects out of the Sasquatch encounters when they'd report them, because that's pretty wild enough. Like,
Yeah.
So maybe people are just now more comfortable to share all aspects of whatever's happening to them.
So interesting. Well, this has been amazing. I currently, I've watched it. I'll probably watch it again. But tell people where they can watch this documentary. It's called Sasquatch Legacy. It's so good, you guys. Small Town Monsters, of course. Plug the hell out of it, Jason.
Yeah, it's showing on the Small Town Monsters YouTube channel right now, and as of today, I mean, this is like a few weeks out from when this comes out, it was at 55,000 views in like just over 3 days, which I'm really excited about. And so yeah, that's where you can find it, at least for now. Yeah, please check it out. People who have seen it so far have really enjoyed it, much like yourself, Morgan, and I thank you for that. And people have reached out saying how much they've enjoyed it, so I really appreciate that. And I might as well plug it too. If you want to hear more of Morgan and I working together, please check out Tracking the Wendigo, which is also on the Small Town Monsters YouTube channel at this point. And people are still watching it. It's doing quite well, and that makes me very happy.
Yeah, it was such a great thing to be a part of, and I'm excited. I'm excited to do some Bigfoot stuff with you at some point. I think there's so much out there, and there's so much here in Alberta that, I mean, we got to do something. So we got to do something. It's phenomenal. The hot spots in Canada. I mean, they're everywhere, and it's so cool. So people, if you're out hiking, you're out doing, a winter hike or anything like that, bring your camera. Take pictures, have it at the ready. So many people say, oh man, I saw it and it was just a second and they were gone. But have the camera ready. You never ever know what you're going to encounter, and enjoy it. Enjoy the encounter, because so many of them are peaceful and wonderful, and I mean, life changing. So it's incredible. So thank you so much, Jason. This has been amazing. Go watch Sasquatch Legacy, you guys. It's so good. Link is in the show notes. This is great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Morgan.
So I don't know about you guys, but I love it when Jason comes on. He's so informative, and it's such an interesting question. What do you do when you move into this dreamscape of a property and you've got these beautiful trees and tranquility, and you go outside and you realize maybe I'm not by myself exactly, or maybe there's somebody else who's staked claim on this land long before I was here. Brings up a lot of questions when you really get into it and start thinking about, well, what does it mean if they were here first? Does that mean that I have to move? I don't know. I guess it depends on how bad the rock throwing gets. I don't know. It's really interesting. Now, what's fascinating is that you go down south into the United States, and there's a lot of different takes on this. There's areas in the U.S. where people have it's cherished if you have Sasquatch on your property. It's considered a blessing that, oh my gosh, you've got a Bigfoot. Congratulations, that's wonderful. And they're considered these very gentle giants. And then you go to other places and you realize, man, it's not how it's taken at all. It's considered the worst possible luck. And there's human conflict and Bigfoot conflict, and it gets pretty messy. A number of years ago, there was a fantastic show on Discovery Networks called These Woods Are Haunted, and many of you guys are probably like, oh yeah, I used to watch that show all the time. It's on Discovery Plus for streaming if you guys are interested, and it's really interesting in the sense that it explores just people's encounters with these creatures, but many of the stories that they featured were eyewitnesses who had moved onto a property and now were presented with this conflict. What do I do? So this isn't something that's an isolated incident. And it's really brings home the question, man, well, what would we do? I don't know. I to be honest with you, I don't know what I would do. If you had something that was very, very aggressive, I'm not sure. But on the flip side of that, of course, there's many people that are reporting amazing and wonderful stories of sharing and trading and exchanging gifts and all of these kinds of things. So I don't know, maybe it has to do with the amount of personality you've got in your Bigfoot when you move in. But there's definitely a lot of harmonious relationships out there too. So I don't know, lots of food for thought about this, and all I can say is, you know, anybody that's wanting to move and your property faces onto some woods, maybe start asking around the neighborhood and, you know, see what encounters have been documented, or see what your neighbors have to say, especially in Canada, because it's probably not going to be documented. You're probably going to have to knock on some doors. So I tell you. But we got a lot coming up for the new year here, and more remarkable eyewitness encounters that we're going to be delving into and talking about. And it's really interesting. I mean, throughout the paranormal world, you know, people see these things and come forward with their stories, and we're going to be getting into a lot of that this year. So, that being said, thank you for joining me on this eerie expedition, my dear listeners. And remember, there is no line between the natural and the supernatural. All is consciousness. Until the next time, stay curious, friends, and Happy New Year. Supernatural Circumstances is a co-production of Entity Seeker, Paranormal Research and Teachings, and The 20th Plane. This podcast is a part of the Curious Cast podcast network. You can find out more about me, Morgan Knudsen, and book me for live appearances at entityseeker.ca. You can also email the show at supernaturalcircumstances.com.
My name is Jordan, and I'd like to invite you to join me on The Canadian Gothic, a podcast covering stories of Canadian crime, mystery, and the offbeat. The Canadian Gothic blends the spirit of late-night talk radio with the depth of a documentary film, and applies that approach to both developing stories and historical cases. So if you're drawn to the dark, mysterious, and offbeat, search for and subscribe to The Canadian Gothic wherever you find podcasts.
You are listening to Canadian Gothic.